On Monday night, Jim Schlossnagle was coaching the Texas A&M Aggies in the College World Series Championship, a do-or-die game that was the biggest sporting event on the men's side in over 80 years for the Texas A&M Aggies. That was on Monday night. Today, on Wednesday, he will be announced as the new head coach of the Texas Longhorns baseball program.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more as playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Yes, today's episode of Locked On Longhorns may be the craziest drop of news we've gotten since I've started Locked On Longhorns, maybe outside of Arch Manning committing to the University of Texas. That was a pretty big one too. But like I said, Monday night, we were all watching Jim Schlossnagle coach the Texas A&M Aggies, who were trying to get their first men's major championship since the 30s, I believe, and they were on Sunday night, 3 innings away from getting their first championship in a major men's sport since the 30s. They lost that game. They lost again on Monday night. And 2 days later, Jim Schlossnagle has made the move from Texas A&M to the University of Texas. So that's what we're discussing on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. There's just so many angles to unpack, so many different ways to discuss what has happened over the last 72 hours between Texas and Texas A&M in the sport of baseball. So first, we'll just start with what we know, what we're getting, right? And then we'll talk about CDC and just the amazing job he's done. And then, of course, towards the end, address the elephant in the room of Jim Schlossnagle leaving Texas A&M to come to the University of Texas, right? I think when you first look at it, we identified on Monday, right, that David Pierce, maybe before that, but we officially identified on Monday that David Pierce was not the direction that we wanted to continue to go in for this Texas baseball program. I've said that David Pierce probably is a good coach, right? But the University of Texas is the wrong place to just be a good coach, right? There is a standard set at the University of Texas that is among the highest in college baseball, if not the highest, right? And CDC, who I'll talk about, a little bit further here in a minute, has elevated that standard since he arrived on campus as the athletic director. You are going into the SEC, where everything is elevated. I mean, you talk about these college baseball programs last year, all SEC final in LSU and Florida. This year, Texas A&M and Tennessee. The year before that, Ole Miss won it, but they faced off against Oklahoma in the final, right? And so technically now, right, or on July 1st, that'll be an all SEC final. This conference dominates college baseball, and you felt like Texas could not go into the SEC based on what they've shown the last 2 to 3 years, right? I was talking the other day, and if Texas entered the SEC right now, right, let's assume that they didn't make the Jim Schlossnagle hire because that moves the needle certainly, but let's say that they had just entered the SEC right now with David Pierce, with largely the roster they had, and then maybe some transfers. I'm not sure we could definitively say that the University of Texas would be a top 5 team in the SEC next year. And that should never be the standard or lack thereof for the University of Texas. We should never be going into a season saying Texas probably isn't a top 5 team in their conference in any major sport, because the University of Texas has all of the resources to be the best of the best. So you knew that David Pierce was a good guy, right? You knew that David Pierce was a good coach and had done some good things at the University of Texas. But you also knew that if you wanted to be the Longhorns, if you wanted to live up to the standard of University of Texas baseball, if you wanted to live up to the standard of SEC baseball, you had to make a change. Like I said, David Pierce was good, but he wasn't good enough. So you insert Jim Schlossnagle into the conversation, and I think you are making an upgrade over David Pierce, right? That's why CDC made this decision. David Pierce was not his guy. Jim Schlossnagle has been his guy for a long time, going back to TCU. He had an opportunity, he felt like, to improve this baseball program going into the SEC. And me personally, and a lot of other Texas fans, I feel like he did, right? And a lot of Texas A&M fans, even if they won't admit it, feel like he did as well, right? Because a lot of them are in excruciating pain, right? Figuratively, not physically, over what they've had to deal with the last 72 hours, right? You lose in excruciating fashion in the College World Series in the championship, right, which would have been the biggest moment in decades for Texas A&M. And then the next day, your coach goes to your biggest rival. I mean, I'd be screaming, crying, throwing up if I rooted for Texas A&M. But I root for the University of Texas, who put the ski mask on. So I'm just fine, right? When you look at Jim Schlossnagle, 945 and 452 all time. I know people said it looks weird when I look down, but you can't see what I'm looking down at. So my notes, I'm old school. Jim Schlossnagle is 945 and 452 all time as a college baseball coach. Prior to that, was an assistant head coach at Tulane. Also took them to a College World Series appearance as an assistant, right? But as a head coach, 945 and 452 all time. UNLV 2002 to 2003, TCU where he really made a name for himself 2004 to 2021, and then A&M from 2022 to 2024, the last 3 seasons. Your new head coach of the Texas baseball program, Jim Schlossnagle, has 8 College World Series appearances, including 4 straight from 2014 to 2017, and 2 of the last 3 seasons at Texas A&M with a record of 135 and 62 at A&M. The coach and the coaching staff that built this monster over the last 3 seasons at Texas A&M, maybe not a monster, but this year they certainly should have won the championship. So the coaching staff that built this championship level program at Texas A&M will be following Jim Schlossnagle to the University of Texas. Jim Schlossnagle, head coach. Michael Early, assistant coach / hitting coach, Texas A&M. He comes over to Texas. Max Weiner, the arm farm, right? The pitching coach / assistant coach. He comes over from Texas A&M to the University of Texas. And then Nolan Kane, right? Revered as one of the best recruiters in the country, recruiting coordinator and assistant head coach as well. So the foundation of what was built at Texas A&M is now coming to the University of Texas. It's kind of like the transfer portal for football players or just athletes, right? Where it's like UTSA spends 2-3 years developing this guy just for him to go to a Power 5 program, right? It's like Texas A&M spent time developing Jim Schlossnagle or giving him everything he wanted just for him to eventually take his dream job at the University of Texas. You have to give all the credit in the world to CDC. I mean, he's just been absolutely dominant, since he's been at the University of Texas. And in terms of athletic directors, in terms of, hires the University of Texas could have made or has made. I mean, CDC has to be at the top of the list or close to the top of the list. I mean, he has been dominant in his respective sport, right? Athletic directoring, right? He has been dominant. 3 of the last 4 Directors Cups, being able to go out and get any coach he's wanted. And pretty much every coach has been a slam dunk hire, right? It's not his fault that Chris Beard couldn't keep his hands to himself, right? Like pretty much every hire CDC has made has been impeccable, right? From Steve Sarkisian to Vic Schaefer. I think now with Jim Schlossnagle, like I said, Chris Beard, that happened. We'll see what happens with Ronnie Terry. There's a bunch of other coaches that he has put into place, right? At the University of Texas that has led to Texas being inarguably the best athletic program in the country right now. I mean, you win 3 out of the last 4 Directors Cups. What's the argument, right? Texas is the best athletic program in the country, and that is on the back of the work of CDC. And it is his job to go out and do what is best for this University of Texas, right? All logic, no emotion, right? And obviously the emotion probably wouldn't apply because it probably felt good to stick it to Texas A&M, right? And Jim Schlossnagle is his best friend. So, that type of relationship would supersede a rivalry of Texas and Texas A&M that's been going on longer than they were born, right? You know what I mean? He probably just wants to work with his best friend again, and I completely understand that. So, when you look at it, he has a duty to make sure he does what's best for the University of Texas, right? And I'm sure it probably felt a little bit grimy, right? Negotiating with Jim Schlossnagle while he's in the middle of trying to win a championship for Texas A&M, because obviously this deal didn't come together Monday night or Tuesday morning, right? This had been in place. They had been probably agreed on it, and it probably solidified the night that they lost to Tennessee, right? But it's CDC's job to do what is best for the University of Texas. And he knew there would be some backlash Jim Schlossnagle would have to deal with, right? He knew how it would look, right? If he went out and got Jim Schlossnagle immediately after the College World Series, win or lose, and brought him from Texas A&M to the University of Texas. But it's our job to worry about that. It's not his. And he did what it's his job to do, is improve the athletic programs at the University of Texas. He went out and got a better coach and a better coaching staff than David Pierce and what David Pierce has had at the University of Texas the last few seasons. So CDC has done his job. Now, some people would question the timing of the David Pierce firing. Was that a little petty? Because if you knew that Jim Schlossnagle was going to be your new head coach, you knew that firing David Pierce or letting that out that day, right, would lead to distractions and questions about, oh, is Jim Schlossnagle going to take this open vacancy the day that he's playing in a do or die championship game? Now, some people would say David Pierce leaked that. I don't think we'll ever know. I'm not sure if any of us are in the know enough to know how that information actually came out. But, if CDC, the University of Texas, Jim Schlossnagle had anything to do with the David Pierce announcement coming out on Monday rather than Tuesday, right, where his players were playing for a national championship that night, then I do think that could have been handled a little bit better. At the end of the day, he was still the coach of Texas A&M, and it's still, a program that's trying to win a championship. So I'm not saying that this happened, but I'm just saying if Jim Schlossnagle, CDC, the University of Texas, anybody had anything to do with that announcement coming out on Monday, the day they were playing for a championship, and it wasn't just simply David Pierce leaking it like Texas fans were saying on Twitter, but of course Texas fans are going to say that because that's what sounds good for the University of Texas. I just don't know if it's true or not, but nonetheless, right, that would be the only thing that would bother me about the situation, right, is that, like I said, we could have just announced this on Tuesday. We could have let them have their championship game. We were taking their coach, period, right, win or lose, right? So we could have waited one day to announce it and not create that stir and controversy, right? Because, that's one of the first questions he got asked after Texas A&M lost the championship. That job opening in Austin, basically, he got asked about that. In terms of Jim Schlossnagle himself, I think that potentially, if you're a fan of another school, you could look at this and say that this could be a character concern for a coach like Jim Schlossnagle, right? Obviously, in terms of on the field, he's amazing, right? I think that he'll be able to replicate what he did at Texas A&M and TCU, going to 4 straight College World Series at a program like that at the University of Texas with the resources we have, right? Also, getting to work with your partner, he helps a lot. And him being with CDC, I think will rejuvenate him a little bit because there were just some, talks about, how things were not exactly peaches and cream at Texas A&M. Not that he just hated going to work every day, but based on what I've heard, obviously there's a lot of stuff coming out now, but just doesn't seem like everything was peaches and cream, right, at Texas A&M. And it couldn't have been if he's been negotiating with the University of Texas for weeks, right, with a championship level team. It couldn't have been peaches or cream at Texas A&M. The thing is that the University of Texas doesn't have to worry about what these other schools have to worry about. Right. And, that's going to come off like arrogance. That's going to come off as cockiness, but it's just reality. Right. TCU had to worry about losing Jim Schlossnagle to Texas A&M because Texas A&M provides more opportunity, more money, more resources, and a better chance to win a college baseball championship than TCU does. So as a fan of TCU, you would expect Jim Schlossnagle to have the same passion and same loyalty to TCU as you do, but he doesn't because he's an employee, right? You're a fan. He is an employee. The first chance he got to take a better opportunity at Texas A&M, which it is, right, in terms of a coach, in terms of what they value, he did, right? And then at Texas A&M, if you're an Aggie, right, you feel like you have a really big school, which it is. Now, it pales in comparison to the University of Texas, especially in Texas, but Texas A&M is a big school with a huge athletic program, right? He was in an ideal destination until a more ideal destination opened up. It's like Cat Williams said, a Chrysler 300 looked like a Phantom until a Phantom pulls up. You know what I mean? And he was at a Chrysler 300. He had a Chrysler 300 in College Station. But then a Phantom pulled up from the University of Texas. And he could look at his situation and say, I have a championship level team. I've gone to the College World Series. I've knocked Texas out of the College World Series since I've been at Texas A&M. I have everything I need to win here. I could go win elsewhere, but I could figure it out here. And obviously, the fans and everybody associated with Texas A&M is saying, oh, we're so close. We can get back. All we got to do is just get back into the portal, fix a couple things, and we can get back. But like I said, Jim Schlossnagle is an employee. His coaching staff, they are employees. They're not fans. They're not fanatics. They're not loyal to Texas A&M outside of their contracts and the money they're making. If a better offer is presented to them, they have every right to take that offer. Just as players are doing now, in college athletics via the transfer portal, just like we do every day in the real world, right? None of us as non-athletes subject ourselves to taking lesser opportunities because of loyalty, right? None of us do that. And we can't expect these athletes or coaches to do that as well. And like I said, if you're a Texas fan and you're thinking, well, he did this to TCU, basically said he wasn't thinking about another job and then took the Texas A&M job. And then on Monday night, he says he took the Texas A&M job to never take another job. And then Tuesday gets announced as the head coach of the Texas baseball program. And I know some people would look at that and say, well, why wouldn't he do that to the University of Texas? Because it's the University of Texas. He's coached Texas baseball since 2004. Clearly, he's comfortable coaching in the state of Texas. What program could he leave? Excuse me. What program could he go to that's not the University of Texas that would be considered an upgrade? None. What program could he go to in the country right now that would be considered an upgrade over the University of Texas? I mean, maybe you can name a few on your fingers, right? But really outside of that, probably none, right? And the only way I could see him leaving is if CDC got up and left and brought Jim Schlossnagle with him. But with what CDC has accomplished the last 4 years at the University of Texas, 3 out of 4 Directors' Cup straight dominance since he's been here, why would CDC ever leave where he is a king? And I expect Jim Schlossnagle and his staff to be kings as well. Went in there with the ski mask, went in there with the Phantom, and took that Chrysler 300 right out of College Station. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.